Hi.
Hello.
I just like to take a moment to connect with each fellow human being through the eyes, just to say hi, introduce myself more telepathically in a sense, so we get familiar with each other, because we are telepathic beings after all, even if we don't remember this. One of the reasons, probably the primary reason, my name's Scott Lemriel, first of all, and I'm a person who has been in contact with benevolent races from other worlds for about 50 years in this lifetime. And I wanted to give you a little bit of background about how this started for me. When I was about 5 years old, living in Utah, I had an experience, I can't really remember, I think it was about 5. I was walking up the steps as a young child to my parents' brick house. And a very profound thing happened. I was suddenly projected out of my body. I knew full well who I was as a being, a mature adult, not from Earth. And I looked up and I could tell that I was comprised of a spherical form of energy. And it had structure. And I understood it, not the body. And I looked up and there was a sphere of golden energy above my head. And it was transparent. And in that sphere of energy were mathematical equations, geometric patterns, complex and very advanced technologies that I understood that spacefaring races use to get around the galaxies, other dimensions, and to communicate with each other. And I saw star patterns in this sphere that showed me where I was in the universe, and I knew it well. I said, Earth? What am I doing on Earth? I bet everybody in here has wondered that. That started me on a journey. When that experience closed down and I came back into that young form, it stayed with me, and it started me on a journey of recovery. A journey of recovering what I knew and who I was before I was brought here, not by my consent. I was originally sent here on a type of mission 66 years ago, to begin this process of transformation for this world. And that mission was intercepted. It's a long story. We'll get into a little bit about how that happened, how I was captured and compelled to inhabit a young child's body on this planet, with all former memory of what I knew suppressed. What was done to me and what was done to everyone here, without their knowledge or consent, is reversible. And I wouldn't be here talking to all of you as fellow travelers into hidden truth if I didn't know with certainty what it is I'm speaking about. I didn't come here to sell books, particularly for my part. For one reason, because we weren't sure it was going to be a public conference, and then it happened at a time when I couldn't order books in time. So I will share examples of the 2 that I've published, but they won't be available for sale here, so that's set aside. I want to share another little bit of an experience that happened to me a little later on when I was 11 to 12 living in Washington State in a little town called Cherry Crest. At that time in Bellevue, on a forested hilltop that had a clear view of Mount Rainier, pardon. And I was coming home from school on a school bus that I would be the last one to be dropped off, and it would drive 1.5 miles up this hill and drop me off a little wooden shed, a bus stop, and then travel down the hill and disappear into the forest. This one time when I came home, I stepped off the bus and watched it drive away, and then my head was compelled to look up. No fear. It was not an abduction experience. And what I saw was 2 groups of what people call flying discs. I recognized what they were, where they were from, and I'm 11, 12 years old. And I was immediately into a telepathic conversation with a human pilot aboard the lead craft. There were two groups of 15 ships in two triangular formations. This was at a time when there was a whole lot of UFO activity on the planet and around Mount Rainier in particular. I believe there was a Piper Cub pilot flying around at the time that saw these ships and coined the phrase flying saucer. It was at a time when I somehow knew never to speak of these experiences to anyone. My parents and my family never knew. I kept it silent, I think wisely. My mother, who's 87, just found out recently what I was and what I was going through when she read the manuscript for this book, because I never spoke of it. These group of ships did a little dance for me, and I think people have seen it in Close Encounters that Spielberg did so well. They didn't look like the ships he portrayed, but they went all over the space. They did acrobatic maneuvers that would be impossible for craft that are not powered by some kind of anti-gravity propulsion systems, electromagnetic fields around the craft. And then they regrouped, and then they just kind of tipped towards me and vanished up into space quite quickly. So I went home. About a week later, I had stayed up. I wanted to know, and this is kind of interesting, I wanted to know what beer tasted like. My parents drank. They drank beer. I didn't understand. So I snuck in my dad's refrigerator and took a can of beer, snuck out of the window, walked across the dew-laden grass up to a little road, and up where this housing development was were little roads between the houses. It was beautiful. Moonless, star-filled night sky. And I popped the can of this beer. I never drank it. The next thing I knew, I was on my back, spread eagle, the can of beer in my left hand, unspilled. And I was looking at one of these craft. And it was about 30 feet across, pulsating from blue to white light. No sound. And I had the same telepathic communication with the pilot aboard that craft. He was human, like us. He knew who I was, but he knew that I had forgotten everything. And he knew why. So this went on for about 15 minutes, and there was a telepathic communication that really downloaded a lot of stuff. Not so much that I didn't know it, but it was set in motion, a series of events that would eventually lead to my recovery of who I am. And this is a process that's underway right now for everybody in this room. And it will go home with them. When I come to a conference nowadays, as some people know, there are 3 craft, always, that hover above the facility at about 5,000 feet. They are shift out of phase a little bit so that you can't see them. They are not detectable on radar, unless they want to be. And they've been here the whole time, protecting this event and the people in it. In fact, they even work with protecting people coming here, and they will protect people when they leave here. I've learned how to trust and rely upon this, because I can't do this on my own. None of us can do any of this that we're endeavoring to accomplish on our own. That's where that began for me. When I was 21, one more story, just a little bit of the iceberg there. I was traveling in a car with a man and his wife and their new young-born baby, and we had gone on a little spiritual adventure around the western United States. Kind of a meditation thing, really. And we were traveling at about 3 a.m., late in the middle of the night, across the salt flat deserts of Utah, heading toward Salt Lake City. And the people I was traveling with liked to hear country western music. So they were playing a station, and the next thing I knew, the station starts blurring through the dials. We all heard this. And it gets tuned to a frequency, and we're hearing the report coming from a superior commander in a local Air Force base, ordering 2 Black Hawk helicopters to fly over where they've detected something on radar. And I got a communication from a human And this time he introduced himself to me. He said, "My name is Manka." I knew him before, couldn't remember everything. And so I told my friends in the car what was taking place, and they asked that we should pull off to the side of the road. So we did. He said, "I want you to see something." We looked out the window as instructed, and the next thing we saw, probably, it's hard to say, maybe 10,000 feet, maybe 15,000 feet. There was a blinding flash of cobalt blue light that radiated and lit up the desert. Hovered there for a minute, then shot down into the ground as if it was going to explode. But there was no crash. And we could hear this commander ordering these two pilots to fly over and investigate this. And of course, when they got there, they didn't find anything. Why he wanted me to see that, I think, has to do with the color of the light and things that happened later on in my life. And then we drove away. So I never talked about it with anybody growing up. But I did have a lot of experiences, both in out-of-body experiences and direct contact experiences and telepathic experiences with them for many, many years. So I've been through kind of a training. So that's what brings me here, is a little bit of background. What I'm really here to talk about isn't about me, but the Say-Rays agenda, who they are. The Say-Rays are a race of human beings. They're the most ancient of races, which makes us the most ancient of species. This is information everybody knew. It's been deprived people. And they are 18 to 25 feet tall. Ambassador Torellian is here. I will pass around a picture of what he looks like for everybody to look at for fun, because it'll be nice, and maybe you can make a connection with him. He's very benevolent, very kind, extremely wise, extremely advanced, even more advanced than, say, people from the Pleiades or other races in our galaxy. Their race was responsible for bringing into existence human beings, little gray guys people hear about, the tall whites, reptilians. And they were benevolent all at one time in our galaxy, and they worked together. The reptilian race that's are 9 to 12 feet tall, you could not beat them in a physical fight. They're very intelligent. They aren't really telepathic, so they use technology for that. But at one time, they were vegetarians. They had to be manipulated by another race very intently to get them to behave the way they have been behaving for the last 500,000 years. I want to go into a little Galactic History 101 with your permission. Would you like to hear a little bit of that? 500,000 years ago, there was a great war in the Milky Way galaxy. Many worlds were destroyed, not just devastated on the surface, blown apart. And there was a war between a galactic alliance of benevolent world systems, numbering many millions, and a smaller faction of totalitarian races whose only motivation was to acquire slaves and resources and property. They lost that war. We had help from friends from Andromeda back then. Emma Louise may be able to share some of that and what she may or may not know about that. But in order to defeat them, because they were being manipulated by an older race, a white ringed reptilian race that came from a parallel dimension, and that's another area we can get into. What are parallel dimensions? Are they real? They were defeated, and a treaty was struck up. Earth at that time was considered to be like a Switzerland. And it was placed on under the treaty to not be interfered with directly by any race, good or bad. And yet races were allowed to have scientific research centers here in small parts of the earth, which created most of what is known as history. Sumerian, Egyptian, Yucatan, Mayan. These were all tyrant cultures. And they were small slave outposts of human beings that were brought here to mine. These guys don't do their own dirty work. That means they were human beings whose original awareness and genetics were tampered with to make them compliant, and when they're done with them, they just leave them here to procreate and create our culture. So there were also good cultures here in the history of this world that people have been made to forget. Lemuria, Atlantis, these were real places. And there were many before that, going back millions of years. So the history we know is not actual. And the ones that most people idolize were run by royal family bloodlines. And what I have to say about that is, royalty and the idea of royalty is not and never was created on this planet. It was brought here. The idea and use of money was not created on this planet. It was brought here. It's used by tyrants to condition people to depend upon it, so that if they threaten you with taking it away, they whip you into line. It's a very effective method of control, but it's not just that that makes people adhere to it. The technology that was used then to control humans and other races is really nothing more than a misuse of advanced extraterrestrial technology. And it's a form of implant, for lack of a better word, and it's not a little chip under your skin. Those little chips were created by the military-industrial complex on this planet in an attempt to reverse engineer these kind of controls that they were being affected by themselves. The first rule a tyrant race uses, they do not come here in ships to blow up a world, like Independence Day. That's not what the tyrant races do. They have private meetings with an elite group, usually royal bloodline families, the most powerful. They have meetings with them to make them preeminent leaders on the planet in exchange for certain things. But in the process of that meeting, they wear a little device on their belt. And it's a technological device that sends almost like a holographic memory program of terror and torture and death, artificial, into the electromagnetic field surrounding a body. They know how to do this. And that field of energy then affects the nervous system, but you don't hear or see it, you just feel it. I know a lot of people in here know what I'm talking about. The beautiful bright side of all this is the implant technology that people on Earth have been exposed to is being reversed. And at this conference, that process is beginning, and it begins at night when you go out to sleep in your dream state at first, and they begin to work with us if you give them permission, only to neutralize some of the more superficial ones that bother most people in their lifetime. Fear, claustrophobia, all these little things that drive people to remain in doubt and fear. Those go first. Then, when a person has more terrorizing implants gone, they begin to be prepared for more direct contact, because the fact of the matter is, most people, even the most dedicated people who want to meet people from other worlds, if a man and a woman landed in a ship outside here and got out and approached you and said, "Come aboard our ship," I can assure you, you'd be terrorized, even though the energy is uplifted. Not because you couldn't do it or didn't want to, but because of the implants. They know that. So they work very carefully and gradually to start to minimize that terror down, because these implants were done to people, the most controlling ones, before this lifetime and long ago in galactic history. And it's a knot to be unraveled. People talk about the secret of water. And our planet here is mostly water. We're mostly water. The power source behind the suns that sends energy that can be used in infrared and other spectrums to power things, was known to people here at one time. And there's a way to access that power source. It's the power behind the power. We're going to get into that with your mission a little later. And with your permission, we'll do it together. And I will send out a tonal frequency, a sound. And it's hidden right in plain sight. It's the first half of the word human. So clever. But when you do it, it opens a door through the pineal gland in the center of the brain. And then it connects to people who have not been implanted, who know what they're doing, they're very advanced. They can help us to unravel this knot because they do know how to do that. I know from my own experience they know how to do that. That's a little background on that. One of the ways they got more in control of this planet was during Eisenhower's term as president. He was the first guy to really meet with these guys. Can you imagine what it would have been like for a 5-star general who just came out of World War II to suddenly be meeting human beings from another planet in technology that's so far advanced of ours? It would have scared him and the generals he worked with. They offered at that time to provide us with technology, not just water technology. Cures for cancer, but water's involved. Cures for diseases, how to neutralize radioactive elements scientifically. How to neutralize bombs and bomb casings. Because out there, it's illegal. No sane race in galactic history would ever build nuclear weapons intentionally. Because they're just destructive. And the imbalanced isotopes that are used to create radioactive materials are only destructive. They're using them now to boil steam to drive turbines to make electricity. How silly is that? At 10 times the cost for natural gas alone. So, Eisenhower also met with another group under treaty. And those guys were not benevolent human beings. And they offered him a proposal because the former group would not give this to us unless we were working as one benevolent governed system here, and we were beginning to explore space. That's true. But they wouldn't give us anything like nuclear bomb technology to destroy ourselves with it. And they would have provided that if Eisenhower was able to arrange a meeting between world leaders, and he knew he couldn't do that at the time with the former Soviet Union. He knew. So he turned him down reluctantly, and the ambassador of that benevolent race said they would be back at a later time when we're more ready. But Eisenhower also met with another group under treaty. These are totalitarian beings. They're bipedal. Scared him because they're very strong, very big, not human, bipedal. And they said, we don't care if you give up your nuclear weapons. Keep them. We want to do some genetic sampling of your population. Of course, being a good man, he said, no, I'm not going to allow that. Of course he wouldn't. His ambassador told him, if you don't sign a treaty with us to get this more antiquated extraterrestrial technology you're looking for, which we'll give you, we'll go to the Soviet Union and we'll give it to the premier in Russia. And we'll let them become the most advanced race on the planet. What Eisenhower didn't know is they were already in Russia, doing the same thing at the same moment. They were clever. And they did it breaking an off-world treaty. And they've broken that treaty so many times it's not worth the paper it's written on. One of the reasons that I'm here speaking today is because, as you know, people are asking, why don't they come and reveal themselves? Why don't they land, change this place? One of the reasons that's held them back before is free will. But the people on earth don't have the true free will they were meant to have. Because then, if they did, they could look into the universe through the pineal gland, even in a physical body, and see and know what's out there from here. That's normal. That's how normal human beings work on other worlds. This is interesting because it means that all of that can be turned back on in all of us. I don't know if anybody in this room knows how to do that. By myself, I don't. But I know beings that do. What happened with them about 5 years ago, Earth time, is really intriguing. because they didn't have the motivation to intervene in another world directly because of this free will issue. But they did intervene enough to keep us from destroying ourselves, because 12 different times during the Cold War with the former Soviet Union, they shut down the launch facilities in the United States and Russia. They didn't harm anybody. They didn't talk to anybody. 3 ships would fly over, shut down the launch computers, and leave. And then when they were at a distance, they would turn the launch computers back on with the launch mode shut down. Or we would have destroyed ourselves already. That is really promising, because it means under treaty they were able to intervene here enough to keep that from happening. They found out not long ago, they kind of knew it, but they found out how important Earth was, and the beings that are living on it are not native to here. They're from out there. I discovered, quite to my shock some time ago, that human beings never evolved on this planet at all, ever. Many of the mammalian species and plant life here did not evolve here either. They were brought here at different times, covering a 50 million year period after the dinosaurs were made extinct. There's a whole history of Earth and our solar system that people have been deprived knowing, and yet every human being has the capability to know this. Every one of us. We're no different. We're very ancient. This is not the first life we've been incarnated in a form. You take that knowledge away from people and keep them in fear and doubt, and they can be bounced around all their lives wondering what truth is and what it is not until life is over. That's coming to an end, fortunately. I'm really excited about that because of the benevolent nature of how they are. They've decided to intervene here more directly because they recognize that human beings don't have the free will they're meant to have to save their own planet. And we're waking up, but 7 billion people aren't awake enough to save that in time. And it's not a fair playing field, which means we've got to first be given back what was taken from us, or recover it, or recall it. And then we can evolve out into the universe in much more grand ways. This technology that will come here, the way this planet will be changed without destruction, has to happen from the inside out. You can't confront world leaders here who are implanted and tell them, listen to truth, change things. They won't hear you. But underway is a program to remove the controlling mechanisms that operate in the hidden government on this planet, and there is one, so that they stop and don't desire being negative anymore. And that same process is underway with all of us. I wish I could make this like a real jokeful, happy presentation, but it's important information. And it's important that people become aware of it, because once they do, they'll never forget it. And that will go home with us in ways that are quite remarkable. I mean, number one, to feel or experience this protection I speak of is an individual personal experience. I can have the experience and tell you about it, but it doesn't do you any good. So, I want to share with you something which I'm simply going to do, and then we'll talk about it, if I have your permission to do so. What that is that a human being can do vocally, or even if they're blind or deaf, once they learn how to do it, even in the imagination. The imagination is the key. This will work. Because as human beings, it's the creative imagination in us that is utilized to see into the universe and know things. Very powerful. If you can change a human being to think of imagination in 2 ways, to split it towards a fear of their own destiny and future and an Armageddon for the planet, and love and cherishment for their own family and a happy future, and get them thinking both ways, you can control them. Because the consciousness is split in half. if you can get people to remember that the imagination and its powerful gift is to be used in only one correct way, which is to have a fiery passion to create that which is only of benevolent benefit to all life. And not just life on our planet. We got to start thinking outside the box. We need to start connecting with beings that are out there. Just because we don't know they're there anymore doesn't mean they are not. I'll give you an example. In just 1/4 of our Milky Way galaxy, there are over 450 million inhabited spacefaring races that are benevolent collectively. That's a staggering number. But the way that works, what they would call in English would be called the Galactic Interdimensional Alliance of Free Worlds. The interdimensional part is important because there's 144 parallel dimensions in creation within the physical universe before you even get to what people call the lower astral plane. And they know how to circumnavigate this. And there are world systems and people and beings and all of that. And they have trade and relationships on a very large scale. And this is what's important about this is for people to discover it for themselves. So this word that I just shared with you, this first part of the word human, actually opens a door and plugs the individual directly into the power source behind what powers the sun. The source behind what powers water. And it is a pure, energetic, conscious living force. And we, as beings, are made of it. Identical in every way. That means on a smaller scale, we have the exact same faculties of creation that people call the Supreme Being has. And what I discovered after a time of training was that we are co-creators and meant to be co-creators, beloved, benevolent co-creators with that source. We're not meant to be ruled by it, dominated by it, dictated to by it. That's not the point. We're meant to be conscious, trusted co-creators with it. And as we're waking up to that now in this conference, what will happen is the energy that you're aware of here will go through you consistently out to the rest of this world with much help from friends from out of town. And that's how they're going to change this place. Without us, they cannot do it. Without them, we will not succeed. Not on our own. We're not alone in the universe. We never have been. It's just so wonderful because when people start to wake up to that individually, they become really effective co-creators. And wonderful things can start to happen in invention and science and health, technologies, how to restructure a planet on a planetary scale is not a mystery or difficult for these guys. They did it to their worlds millions of years ago. They know what they're doing and they know how to do it. We just need to be a little humble. We need to be able to ask and admit to ourselves that we are co-creator gods in eternity with a great presence, but we also have to admit we're not alone. And if there are millions, even billions of beings out there that want to help us right now, that have the spirituality and technology to do it, don't you think we should ask for it? I mean, if we don't, who will? So with your permission, I want to do something. This tone, this hue, is not native to this planet. It's older than the Milky Way galaxy. It was put in place as a fail-safe. When people begin to become aware of it, they begin to connect into change which goes in one direction, not two. And what's important is that when you do it, you'll experience that it vibrates the head upward only. It actually vibrates the pineal gland, the center of the brain. It's fascinating. Beings that I work with hear this across time and space. It's not a problem. So this is how I get their help and their assistance. I not only ask for it, I'm overjoyed to embrace it. With your permission, I would like to do this 12 times. And if each of you do it with me 12 times, we'll take it at a low tone and we'll move it up 12 tones. and watch what happens. Would you like to do that? Okay, I want to read something very quickly. Because it's a formation of words in any language, it doesn't have to be English. It can be French, Finnish, German, Russian. It doesn't matter, as long as you put the words in your own language. And I think I can do it without that thing. It goes like this. When you get into the hue, at night, say, 15 minutes maybe only, get comfortable in a chair or lying on a bed. Take several deep breaths. And in the process of those breaths, put all your fears and concerns for the world and its destruction, fears for health, money, anything, just for this time, on a shelf in your imagination. Just put it there. You can take it back, just leave it there. Then imagine, and this is important, most important point. Michko talks about this a lot. Love and gratitude are key here. When you do this, first imagine someone you love and respect and are grateful for being in your life. It can be a person, place, or a thing, but it has to be genuine. And then we'll do a couple of hues just to start this off. And then I want to read to you something you can repeat with me if you will, and then we'll go into these 12 hues, okay? If you want to do this with me, we'll just do 3 hues real quick. Take a breath between them. Let the vibrations start to rise. What I do in my own practice, because it takes practice, our own effort to make this connection. Why? Because of free will. They will help us and intervene directly, but we have to ask. It's one of their it is their highest law. The only reason they're intervening here now and are starting to ramp that up is because our true free will has been deprived of us. So they're working on reestablishing that first. Very important, crucial. Send this out in your own way. You can reword it any way you like. Here's what I do. And you can repeat it with me if you like. Safely show me deliberately hidden truth on a grand multi-dimensional scale. And the much greater knowing of the expansive love within it. Then we'll go into these 12. I'll start low enough, and hopefully if you want to stand, it can help, but you can sit too. I'll stand. And we'll go from one tone, take a breath, pause, another tone a little higher, and we'll go up 12 times. Okay? All right? Okay, here we go. Now, we just look and listen. Thank you for sharing that with me. I believe my talk is pretty much concluded at this point. With that, and I couldn't top that to save my life. You have any questions? And thank you very much for having me here.